Hello, and welcome back to Daddy Rolled a One. I'm Martin, and today I'm going to be covering the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds role-playing game, also commonly known as Savage Pathfinder in the community. This is a role-playing game that is going to be mixing the fast, furious fun, which is the mantra of Savage Worlds, along with some of the customer characterizations, the lore and world building, and the overall IP of the Pathfinder role-playing game by Paizo. Specifically, this one was really a little bit more based on first edition Pathfinder, as you can see here from the cover art, which is pretty much identical to the cover art that was on the first edition Pathfinder rulebook, core rulebook. However, because this does use the mechanics of Savage Worlds, the addition of Pathfinder doesn't matter because the IP is pretty much the same across both first and second edition. Before I get started, I would like to ask, if you enjoy this video, if you could please like and subscribe to my channel. And also please share this video on your social media networks. That is the best way and quickest way for me to grow my audience and grow my channel. And then lastly, please feel free to jump into the comments. Let me know what you either liked or didn't like about this video. Maybe ask questions about something, a topic that about Savage Pathfinder that you needed more information on. And you can also let me know what other things you'd like to see me cover in future videos. So with that said, Savage Pathfinder is a hardcover rulebook, full color. It's 256 pages, and it is a bit of that non-standard size that I covered when I talked about Pathfinder. So it's about 7 by 10.5, so smaller than a standard like D&D type rulebook, but it is larger than some of the smaller A5 size that the old school Renaissance community likes to publish. So this is right in between of those two sizes. Really quickly, before I jump into what's in this book, this is a standalone role-playing game. You do not need Savage Worlds rulebook in order to play this. Everything that you need to play a Pathfinder Savage Worlds game is in this book, all of the rules and everything else. So I'm not going to be covering the mechanics of the game because I covered that in my video on Savage Worlds. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how the Savage Worlds game works, if you're not familiar with it, maybe you're coming directly from a Pathfinder first edition, or maybe you're someone who was playing 5th edition D&D and you're looking for something a little bit different. You've heard Pathfinder's fun, but you want to get out of your D&D comfort zone because Pathfinder's first edition is really a little bit more based on D&D mechanics. Then you want to watch my video on Savage Worlds to learn a little bit more about the mechanics. I'll put a link to that up here. So just jumping in, my rule book has these neat little bookmarks. I don't know if this comes in every rule book. I'm not sure. My friend helped kickstart this and he gave this to me as a gift. So it's got these neat little bookmarks that just have these some rules on here that you might need to have handy during the game so you're not doing a lot of page flipping. It's got some neat art and stuff on there. So it's got these nice ribbons, as you can see down here, to help mark pages. And as I said, this is a standalone game, so everything that you need to play is in here. Getting started, how to make a characters, your equipment and gear, your rules, of which is this section right here. That's the entire rules of how to run the game. You've got your adventurers toolkit with things like how to run a mass battle, something like that. Powers are essentially what Savage Worlds calls spells. So that's going to be covered in this section. You've got magic items, a short section on game mastering, and then there's a very, very short bestiary, and I'll talk about that at the end. So one of the things that they do in this particular game is they talk about what's different between this and a standard Savage Worlds game. And that's really a great place to start. So what's new for Savage Worlds player? You've got your map over here, but then this is going to tell you what has changed versus a standard Savage Worlds game. So some of the edges are different, things like that. You've got your characters here. Again, I talked about how to make characters in my other video. So one of the things that they've done here, of course, they have changed the name race. It is now called Ancestry. And they've got the standard ones that were in the Pathfinder rulebook. Anybody who has the Pathfinder first edition core rulebook will recognize all this art. This is all reused art from that game, which is fine because it helps tie it to things that people might remember from playing that particular edition of the game. You've got your hindrances, which again are a core part of every Savage Worlds type character to have a hindrance, and it covers all of those. And then it gets into your traits, which are like your attributes. And then your edges. Okay, now edges are like feats. Again, we talked about that in that other video. But there's a new type of edge in Savage Pathfinder or Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, which are called class edges. This is how you're going to replicate the idea of having a character class from Pathfinder First Edition, because Savage Worlds is not a class and level system. It does not have classes. So the way that they have replicated that here is by having class edges. So these are edges that you get for free upon creating a character at what's called novice rank, which would be the equivalent of, I guess, like a first level in a class and level system. And you get it for free instead of taking either a professional edge or a different other kind of edge or a background edge. So all of these class edges are brand new for this book, and they're going to map to the core classes that you're used to. So there's Barbarian, there's Bard, Cleric, all the way through Fighter, Monk, Rogue, Rangers in here. Now in Sorcerer, very specifically, they also have pages for Bloodlines. And then you've got your Wizards. So those are new, but then you've also got your regular edges that people are familiar with from Savage Worlds. You've got your combat edges. There were background edges. You've got leadership. There's power edges. There's weird edges. They also have prestige edges, which are going to map to the prestige classes from the Pathfinder First Edition core rulebook. So Arcane Archer or Assassin, Dragon Disciple, those kinds of things. Social edges, and then of course weird edges. You've got your trait summary, your edge summaries, all those types of things. So that's on creating characters, and then we jump right into gear. And a new thing that they added for the types of gear in Savage Pathfinder that does not exist in Savage Worlds is armor piercing for certain types of weapons. They changed a few things around, but you saw everything that's different was on that one page that I showed you at the very beginning. So not that much is really all that different. So this goes through all the gear, and then this is the rules section, which is pretty much identical to the one that's in Savage Worlds as far as how to run the game. Then it covers things like using allies in a game, doing mass battles, dramatic tasks. Now, one thing that I didn't talk about in my review of Savage Worlds is a concept called Interludes, which is repeated here in this game because it's a core part of the game. And it's just a fun way to give the players some narrative control over what's going on. So when a GM wants to, they can call for an interlude. You pull cards, just like you were doing initiative. Initiative is based on drawing cards. And based on what type of interlude you're doing, whether it's downtime, backstory, or a trek, also the type of card that you draw, whether it's a spade, heart, diamond, or club, the GM will give you a prompt and allow the player to then narrate what actually happened. And if the GM decides that the player really was being creative and put something into it, maybe you get a Benny. So that's kind of a fun thing. And I did that in the first session that I played of Savage Pathfinder a few weeks ago. This is going to cover, this section also is going to cover things like the outer planes and what those planes are. Then you get into your powers, which again I mentioned are like spells. So one of the things that's fun, and I talked about this when I covered Savage Worlds, the role-playing game, is that the player gets to add a trapping to their spells to describe how that spell works. And they give you examples here of how to do that with the powers in Savage Worlds to sort of map them to spells that you're used to from Pathfinder. So example, they say a druid character might call their barrier, which that's a power. You see here, barrier. They might call it Wall of Thorns, while a sorcerer might call it a Wall of Force. Or a protection power, a druid might call it Barkskin, while a sorcerer might call it Mage Armor. So those are things that, like, again, Savage Worlds is intended to be fast and furious, so it's not going to have hundreds of pages of spells. It's only got just these few pages, and it's up to the player to talk about how they are going to apply trappings to make it unique to their character. So that's actually something I really like. It's a feature. It's not a bug. It's not intended to be, as customizable and those nitty-gritty differences that exist in the Pathfinder core rulebook. Anybody who has that rulebook knows, just looking at this one, the size of this versus the size of the Pathfinder core rulebook is very, very different. So this is just a summary of the powers. They get into weapons and weapon qualities, like magic weapons, essentially. And then they add some different magic items that don't exist in the Savage Worlds Pathfinder book. Again, running the game, this is game mastering. They're talking about things like awarding bennies, things like that. And then there's a small bestiary. Now, the problem I have with this bestiary, and it's fine, but there is a separate bestiary book that you can get for this, and you would really need to, because, for example, this doesn't even include like a basic monster such as a goblin. So it's mostly animals, although it does have zombies. But if you're a game master needing to run this game, you would need to get the bestiary in order to get all those other monsters. These are your templates for different types of powers, large blast or medium blast. My GM has these as like, you know, a clear acrylic things that we can just put on a map to kind of see where they map out. But this is something you could easily photocopy and then just cut out on a piece of paper. And that's it. That is the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds role-playing game. I also have a separate book that my friend gave me. This is the companion. This is essentially a world guide. So it's another 128 or another hardback book. This one's 128 pages, but it covers the world of Golarion, which is the Pathfinder, you know, IP game, like they're Forgotten Realms, essentially, if you want to think of it that way. So this is going to cover the Pathfinder Society, which is an adventuring society. It's a great way to great hook to get characters involved in an adventure right away. But it's got, you know, the Inner Sea region, which is the main area of Golarion that's been covered. It covers the factions. It covers the religion, like the different deities in the game, as well as other gods. So this one, actually, this other gods section and outsider demigods covers things like demons and devils and that kind of thing. There's a little bit of talk about the great beyond, the different planes. Again, it covers it. And then artifacts. So those high-level magic items that, again, aren't really a core feature of Savage Worlds. So they put it into this particular book. So you can see, again, here's where they cover all those demons and devils. And that is it. So Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. And if you have any questions, please, again, I would appreciate you leave a comment, let me know. And I appreciate you watching the video and would like to ask if you want to support the channel. Right now, the best way to do that, other than sharing this video on your social media networks, I do have a shop. There's a link in the description of this video, as well as in the About section of my page here on YouTube, where I have exclusive designs that you can't get anywhere else. They're available on t-shirts, hoodies, posters, mugs, anything like that. So if you want to show me a little support, that's a great way to do it. Head over there and grab one of those products. So thank you, and I'll see you soon.